Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by our friends at Jody Jones Dentistry. I'm your host, Chris Lee, our podcast part of the 440 Sports Network. Today's show will be with Chip Fridrich. We'll unwind Vanderbilt's baseball season, which came to a very abrupt end in the Nashville Regional, an 8-7 loss to Oregon on Saturday night, followed by a 2-1 loss to Xavier on Sunday. Anyway, Chip and I will rewind the regional, talk about the state of Vanderbilt baseball in general, just hit, I think, on a lot of topics that are on people's mind, and we'll probably have some more content with Chip and also with Luke Wyatt as we assess the baseball program and where it is. But anyway, I think you'll like today's episode of the show. Lots of good stuff in there. So without further delay, thank you so much for listening, and here's our episode with Chip Fridrich. Chip Fridrich joins me. It is Monday morning. Vanderbilt has fallen to Xavier on Sunday after falling to Oregon late Saturday night. Season now over. We got a lot of ground to cover. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be on with you again. We did not have a pod last week, so this is kind of a lot to unwrap here. And I think in the press conference last night, Tim Corbin said there's a lot to go over with his team and analyzing what happened over the past year, the last 6 months. As he mentioned, it's a go, go, go starting in August. It's an everyday thing. And then the brakes get slammed on we've heard him once. He said it, half a dozen times about how the emotions of when a season ends, it's like a car crash or you slam it on the brakes at 100 miles an hour and everything kind of stops and everybody goes on their own way and goes to summer ball and gets drafted. And in this day and age, some go to the transfer portal. So a lot to digest here. It's a little hard to do when it's 24 hours after losing a game to Xavier, a team which, and talking candidly with you and some friends, I don't know if Xavier is better than Mississippi State or Ole Miss if they were in this league. The thrill of winning the Southeastern Conference tournament and having what happened in this regional, the thrill of everybody with smiles on their faces on Friday night with the victory over Illinois State, and then what happened over the last two games. It's just, I would say, we've been doing this. I don't know how long we've been doing this, Chris, 5, 6, 7 years doing this podcast. You having me on and following the game as an alum and a former player and doing some radio and TV work for Vanderbilt when I got out with Willie Donick. We were doing the radio and did some TV work over the years. So I have a pretty good pulse of what goes on with this team. And I cannot recall a team that was more up and down, inconsistent. I hate using the word bipolar, but it's sort of in a medical sense because that's a horrible thing to have. But using it as a sense of descriptive of up and down, and 1 week in segments of the season where you're undefeated for 12 games, 11, 12 games, and then you're in skids, and it was a really up and down, inconsistent season. I think when you take a look at this situation, maybe in a week or two, or maybe a month, and really look at what they accomplished and the talent and the possibly some inadequacies they had at some hitting and some misfortune they had with some fielding and especially in the regional, I think it probably will make a little bit more sense. But 24 hours after losing as they did this regional, it's a tough pill to swallow. And I think I could tell from Tim Corbin's comments last night and the players' demeanor after the game, this one's gonna stick for a long time. And it's just going to have to take some self-analysis of the program, where they are, where they need to go, how they are in this NIL portal world. And you and I have talked about this, man. If I could summarize what you and I have talked about over the last 8, 9, 10 weeks, we've talked about a lot, the state of athletics and where it's going. And I think there's some decisions that need to be made with this program going forward with a lot of programs, not just Vanderbilt, but how are they going to combat these and adapt and moving forward. But disappointing finish. Since we talked, though, SEC Tournament Championship, but this one's going to sting for a while.
Yeah, I've got 5 or 6 key topics I want to go over, and the tricky part is deciding how many to do with you and how many to do with Luke when I do that one with him later this week. I might just do both with each of you to get your takes. But this has felt like since mid-season where you sort of saw, you could sort of find whatever you wanted to see with this team, and whoever was right was going to yell about it. We were right at the end of the season. I'm always going to sort of lean on stats and things like that because I think otherwise it gets into feeling, and I could feel like a tomato can. That doesn't necessarily make me one, but I like stats so much because they take a lot of stuff out of it. They've been consistently ranked top 10 in the computers all year, not just RPI, but the ones I like that incorporate margin of victory and who you played and stuff like that. But you use the word inconsistent, and I think that was sort of the key to the season. One of the 2 keys to this season was that when you score 20 runs one game and one game the next, you're averaging 10.5 runs, but you're probably going to be 1-1. And that was just kind of how their season went. It felt like the offense came in bursts like that, and it felt like when it wasn't there, it really wasn't there. That was the fear of everybody all along, and eventually that was one of the 2 reasons that their season collapsed yesterday. The other being that the way it was built, that also collapsed with the pitching injuries. We'll get into that in a minute, but that side certainly was doing a lot of shouting about I was right yesterday when this ended the way it did. And I'm not saying that it was wrong, but certainly the doomsdayers that had that as the take of what this team is, that's what ended up winning out over the weekend.
Yeah, you mentioned the stats. The Mississippi State free-for-all down in Starkville, it was worth 1 win. It was worth 1 victory just as much as a 1-0 victory when it's all said and done. I know it inflates the statistics, but this I think when you summarize the season in today's world of college baseball, some people look at hits and how many hits they got. This team was plagued all season long by not having the big hit.
Chip, they didn't have a big power bat. They had one, and he went cold the last month of the season. And I think in that time, it seemed like he led the country in long foul balls that would have been home runs if they were, 5 feet in another direction. And that's just how it went. And when that went bad, that killed a lot of their margin for error.
Yeah, I mean, you look at where this team was in home categories in today's world again. I think the ball's pretty live. The bats are pretty live again. But, doubles, triples, extra base hits, bases loaded. How many times did we leave the bases loaded in key stretches and big games?
Twice on Saturday.
Yeah, just runners in scoring position. I think that if you said, give me 3 bullet points about this team and why they didn't get it out of the region or why they had the year they had. And we're talking about a team that won the conference championship and won 42 games. But still, as we sit here on June the 5th, and they're getting their things out of their locker instead of talking about a super regional, I think I remember a podcast 8-9 weeks ago, and probably I didn't knock on wood, but we talked about not being plagued by the injury bug. And then you had the situation where you had a first-round pitcher at a high school, Andrew Dukanich, who threw 6 1/3 innings this year, and he certainly could have been used, and he got hurt. And then you had the situation with Hunter Owen, and he got hurt. And you had the situation, as you go on down the line, of course, we know, the big injury, which with Carter Holton and the inconsistency of having him on the line, and it just steamrolled to where I think the pitching, even with those injuries, I think the pitching was good enough. I mean, Hleboki yesterday pitched good enough to win.
Yeah.
I mean, he pitched a really good baseball game, but there was no backup behind him. I think it's the injuries got the pitching staff. I think number two, the inability to have a power bat. As you mentioned, I think maybe people figured, in a sense, they figured out Shrek towards the end of the season. I'm not sure. Maybe the scouting reports caught up with him, but the inability to have a big bat and the complete failure of being able to get big innings with runners on scoring position. I don't know how many times you would hear the stats if you were listening on the radio of, Vanderbilt's now 2 for 15 and runners in scoring position. It just kept every key game. I thought this team had the comfort of having a good schedule at the beginning of the year, favorable schedule, I might add. But when it ran up against the Floridas and the Tennessees and the power staff, I think just the hitting was not being able to be matched. And those were, if you just, again, 30,000-foot view, 24 hours after they fall in the regional and are eliminated, I think those three things, for a person who, a head coach who preaches and lives on consistency, this team became wildly inconsistent. I thought that in their performance, I should add, I think they did the little things he kept talking about in the lead up to the regional, how doing the little things on a daily basis is what his recipe was of why this team was successful. And I agree with that. I could totally see that. But just on a talent level of performing and being able to move runners over, hit the ball the opposite way, it's kind of like a repeat of what we talked about when this team went to the College World Series and lost against Mississippi State that we talked about on that podcast. I remember the day after was how Mississippi State appeared to be the team that hit the ball the other way, would take walks when they could, hit by pitches. This team seemed like they were a fly ball machine the last 48 hours, where balls were lazily flying out to the track by some of their key players and trying to maybe do too much or lifting the ball. I don't know if it's a hitting technique or philosophy, but that seemed to be a failure. But I will say this, that, and I don't know, you and I haven't talked about this since they won the SEC tournament, but it was almost as if, and I thought this, I didn't think this yesterday, I thought this while Tim Corbin was on the air with two of the players, and I forget that maybe it was Shrek and someone else, I'm not sure. It was on the SEC network, and they were on the network after the game, and they were interviewing him. And I almost sensed Tim's demeanor was a little bit of shock that they pulled that off. It was different. I don't know. He was excited, but I think the look on his face as they dig the dog pile with the team was, I almost got the sense at the time of, can we do this again? Are we going, this is a remarkable stretch. We won how many games in how many days? 5 in 5 days, whatever. But I think, because I'm a pretty good reader of people, and I almost got the feeling that you wonder, like, man, we just did this, and this is pretty incredible. But I have a feeling next week we're going to have to do it again to win a regional. Did you get that? I just felt like... Well,
I didn't get to see as much of the SEC. I saw about 60% of the SEC tournament. We traveled to Colorado for my niece's graduations, spent a few days there. I was watching here and there on my phone, and then we went to Mexico. And boy, you've really got to trick a lot of things to watch any college baseball down there. I mean, ESPN is blacked out in Mexico, the American part. Like, you can't, and even on the plane back, I had trouble watching games. It really wasn't until I got in the States that I could stream from ESPN. So I'm not the guy to. I don't know. I did some research and they black you out. I thought, well, who cares? Okay. I'll just connect to my own cable system online. That didn't work. Yeah. What I had to do was wind up disconnecting from the internet and streaming data, which is A, slow, right. B, choppy, and C, you run out of your daily allowance after a while. So that was a real headache trying to follow things from down there. Not to mention doing family stuff.
Right.
And getting the, hey, you are going to quit working and spend some time with us stuff. Not to be critical, but that's the way it goes. And I get it. I told him, I said, look, this is a key time for me of the year. This is one of my probably 4 or 5 busiest weeks, and frankly, most enjoyable. So it just was the trip was bad timing for me. I'm not complaining, but that's just, 2 things I would have loved to do, and I had to do them simultaneously. But anyway,
that's right.
All that to say is there's going to be a lot of stuff I missed from the SEC tournament. But yeah, I mean, I did not think that. I don't think that ever crossed my mind before last week that they would win that event. I mean, I just didn't.
Oh, you're talking about the SEC tournament?
Yeah, and I thought once they get to Florida again, it's that's when the wheels are going to come off, and then they kind of didn't. Maybe Florida was trying to stay fresh for this week. I don't know, but I mean, he was not the only one surprised that they were able to run the table down there.
Yeah, and you just kind of got the feeling that it was just a reality of setting in that, like, gosh, we just expended a lot of energy down here, and we burned a lot of arms, and emotionally, we, burn a lot of fuel down here to come home and to see them. And you would think, oh, there's going to be some carryover, and goodness, Friday night with the victory over Illinois State, I keep saying Illinois starts. Excuse me, Eastern Illinois. Beg your pardon. There's a lot of directional up there, directional schools. But the victory against Eastern Illinois, you just kind of thought, this thing's going to continue to roll, but it didn't, and it just completely stopped to the point where R.J. Austin, who was the MVP of the tournament as a freshman, and had a really unfortunate weekend for him, and just for an example, and you just rolled through where you thought in a scenario that Hunter Owen with pitching on a pitch count down in Hoover, that he was going to come out, and he just was not sharp in his 4 innings of work as he normally is, giving up 4 earned runs and 6 hits. You thought Ryan Ginther, with being out for not pitching in Hoover and hadn't pitched in 2 weeks, well, the opposite happened. He gave up 4 earned runs, which in a game of inches, in a game of almost, if he gets that 2-strike pitch, if he gets the 2-strike pitch to be a strike, like if you watch the LSU series and watch that guy zone behind the plate, that would have been a strike if that guy's behind the dish. And then the next guy hits a bases clearing double. And it seemed like that just right then and there, it seemed to take the emotion out of the game. So I don't know. That was just my observation looking back, that I even told my kids, I said, boy, if they sure did burn a lot of gas here down in Hoover, and to have to replicate it, knowing that they were on a short leash with some guys, knowing that they had guys hurt, the way they did it, and some of their inadequacies that they have in the hitting department of moving guys over and running and scoring position, you just almost wondered if it was when they got beat by Oregon the way they did, if that just didn't do them in. And I think they were asked last night, I think Enrique Bradfield said, his quote was, I think that maybe had something to do with it, that emotionally it just took its toll of it when they lost that game 8-7.
Which was weird because I was at the press conference Saturday night after they lost to Oregon. And again, I pay a lot of attention to how he talks about his team. Last year, he would use the word uncertainty a lot, and that's kind of where the season ended. He liked this team from the beginning. It felt to me like he felt like it was mature, that it had chemistry, and it felt like he had a lot of confidence in it all along. And I was watching a guy at the press conference Saturday night that in my mind, I'm thinking, he thinks they're going to come back and win this thing. But they didn't.
Yeah, I didn't watch that press conference of the Oregon game. I failed to watch it. Usually I do. I watch those. So, but it's, some teams have that ability, and he talked about that. Some teams have the ability to, they look at it and they say, well, we're going to run the table on this thing and win 3 games in a row. It is such a huge advantage when you're in the position like Oregon was last night, when you're sitting there waiting and you kind of can relax all day on Sunday. You don't have the pressure of waiting through rain or lightning delays, I guess it was. And it's such an advantage to win that game, because you are really, and I even made this observation, and not to discredit the championship that they won in the tournament in Hoover, but they won 5 games in 5 days, Chris, against teams 6, 7, and 8 pitchers in a way. Most of them. There were some that frontline, they jumped on the Florida starter. But for the most part, you're playing an event that you're familiar with. Maybe your opponents are not really have a lot of want to expend a lot of energy and strategy-wise of pitchers. Then when you lose that game like you did against Oregon, now you're facing, and they just ran into a buzzsaw, I think, with the Xavier pitcher that came in and had to face their closer. Because I think we saw eventually what Oregon did with them and disposed them, and winning the tournament was fairly easy.
They ran out of pitching at that point at the Vandy game, I believe.
Sure. So, Hoskins for Xavier just pitched 7 innings strong and kept them within striking distance. And you felt like as the game went on and on, as long as they stayed close, it was going to be an advantage to them. And you were just waiting. I kept telling my sons, we have to get 4 or 5 runs here and open this thing up, and I think it'll be over. And we never could do it. When you have 4 hits against a team like Xavier, and I'm not saying Xavier's horrible by any means, but I don't think they're a quality team that Vanderbilt, they're a team that Vanderbilt usually handles in a region. Yeah, and a team that ends up 39-24 or 39-25 actually overall. But it just, they stayed close. And teams like that, when you do that, you had the Schultz kid who played at Ensworth who went 2 for 4, got 2 big hits to keep innings alive for them. And emotionally, he wanted, I'm sure he wanted to do well against a hometown team. Probably didn't get recruited by, and just the little intangibles that they had going for them. It was like a morgue going in there in that 9th inning after the lightning delay, all the Vanderbilt fans going into their seats and the Xavier fans doing cheers and stuff. You just felt the tightness. And I really didn't like our body language going into the 9th when we came back. We looked tight, frustrated, didn't have that instinct that we were going to win that game, and it showed.
We'll get into the hitting aspect of it because, boy, Twitter and my message board were lighting Mike Baxter on fire, which has kind of been a common theme for 2 years now. But a couple things before that, just back to the big picture of the season. And look, I'm not telling Vanderbilt fans they shouldn't have concerns, they shouldn't be disappointed. Because, look, this is a program that really, for that stretch between 2019 and 2021, they won a national title, came within a game of winning another, and who knows what happened in between in 2020. As I've said all along, I love their chances. From that point to now not getting out of 2 regionals. And then if you have the layer of the whys in the context of college baseball, it becomes a lot more explainable. But if you'd gone back, because how was this team built? It was built on pitching, on defense, on getting guys on base, moving guys around, hitting gaps, things like that. And you go back and look at it, I think before the season, the feeling I got is that they felt like their top 3 arms, probably in this order, were Holton, Owen, and Dukanich. And I think they felt like Owen was the most talented guy they had. And certainly you saw that when he was healthy and it worked. And I don't know if he was healthy or not, or rusty, or what the deal was on Saturday night, but it certainly wasn't the Hunter Owen that was peak Hunter Owen when we saw him this year. And Dukanich, you almost don't consider him a loss because he barely played. And when he did play, it wasn't great. But if you saw him in fall, it looked like they had something there. So if you say you're going to take away maybe your best 3 pitchers, I mean, frankly, the answer was Futrell was in that group. And putting Dukanich as one of their top 3 was projecting, but that's what you do when you got a first-round arm sometimes. But anyway, however you want to slice it, they were without 2 of their top 4 arms. I guess you could say Maldonado would be in there too, if you want to go to the bullpen. But they were without a key part of their foundation. One of their guys in Owen, they sort of had to pitch in that spot, and for whatever reason, It didn't go well. And then Bradfield was going to be a big part of it too, just getting him on. I mean, you would have thought he would have stolen maybe 60 bases this year. I don't know what he ended up at. I don't even know if he got to 30. And finally last night, Corbin and Bradfield admitted kind of what I'd suspected and said all year. He just did not look like the same guy to me. There must have been, Chip, a dozen ground balls that I thought he would have beaten out this year with last year's Bradfield or the Bradfield the year before. And with him not being the same guy, I mean, my goodness, the whole foundation of what they wanted to do gets taken off the table in a lot of ways, and they still won 42 games with that.
Yeah, you look and see what Bradfield did from what he hit when he was a freshman compared to what he ended up this year, and it's, Bradfield hit 330 as a freshman and he hit 280 as a junior. What is that an indictment of? Is that a kid who's
I'm just going to say, and I know that Baxter's been criticized to death, and I think some of it's probably deserved, but I don't blame him from Bradfield. Part of Bradfield's skill set is just beating out grounders. Everybody talks about the batting average. Well, how many of his hits the last few years have been on routine ground balls or choppers that he just didn't beat out this year, or bunts that, he could have beaten out? He wasn't bunting as much, it seemed like to me. And even if you play him right, you got to make a play perfectly to get him. I saw him thrown out at first so many times this year on balls he would have beaten out in any other year. To me, Bradfield is a different issue from all the other hitting stuff.
Yeah, well, there's no way that your leadoff guy, your main stolen base guy, never gets on base like happened over the weekend, and that's what happened. He either had some strikeouts or fly balls to left field. He took the other way, and it was the same swing every time. It seems like this weekend he didn't. I don't think he had one chopper yesterday that he didn't beat out. It was close, but he was out. So yeah, I mean, I hate it for Enrique Bradfield. I love the way he talked yesterday. His demeanor. He is going to have a professional career. I think he's going to need to get stronger, and he's going to have to hit some more line drive and change the approach a little bit of the hitting. So I'm not saying that he got exposed by any means, but I think I hate it for him because I think he lost some draft capital. I think you would have probably agree over the last month and a half to where they were talking about.
I don't know. I mean, if you. To me, if you factor in the fact that he was not 100% healthy and you say, well, can he get that back? Then I don't know that it changes much, but maybe it does.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression that he was just trying to muscle ball a little bit and be a power guy, and that's not his game. Just as he mentioned, I'm just repeating what you said.
Yeah.
As far as bunting and slashing the ball and driving the ball up the middle, I just think it kind of changed a little bit. I think they had a bunch of guys up there who were, I think that, without a doubt, later on as it went, Leneve was trying to hit the ball out of the park every time he came up. I just felt like he was, and that's his style. Troy Leneve is probably, I think it was said on one of the broadcasts that I watched from the SEC tournament, probably had the most power of anybody when he makes contact on this team. Yeah. When he gets it, he gets it. That ball's still going that he hit in the pine trees in Hoover. So, and I felt like those guys, and even to the fact of the last at bat, there was a lot of pressing with Trek and Leneve and even Brad, the guys just trying to hit the ball out of the park instead of, you can't, I've said this a couple times this year, you can't steal first base. You got to get on first base. And I think Corbin said that in some of his discussions. He said, it's, quit trying to hit the big ball, trying to hit the ball off the fence, line up singles, get on first base with a walk, get to first base, and the next guy get to first base and get to first base and try to where you're and then you have to have the guy who can capitalize and drop the ball off the fence or give you the double or triple. And I just felt like the couple of those guys last night were pressing, trying to do too much and get them, it's like it's a 2-1 game and I'm going to tie this thing up with a big swing, and their swings got real long and they were loopy, and that's what happens to contribute to a lot of fly ball outs that were short of the track, or fly balls that down the line that just died and were caught by their outfielders.
Yeah, I thought Austin, Vastine, and Leneve this weekend, every swing was from the heels. And if you want to start where I think criticism of the hitting coach is fair, that's one place I would start. Their approach in the ninth inning yesterday was it was the encapsulation of everything that's frustrated everybody all year. You know, Shrek watches 2 strikes go by on his at-bat, then just kind of flings the bat and hits a weak pop-up. Nolan gets to 3-0, and then I believe it was, and then swings at 2 sliders for his last 2 that I don't think he would have hit if his bat were 6 inches longer. And after the first one, you had to know what was coming on the second. If he takes either one of those, he walks, and maybe we're having a different conversation today. And then Maldonado just rolled one over. You know, he came up the night before, hit a home run on a big spot. It's hard to criticize him, but I just thought those 2 at-bats out of 2 seniors were sort of the poster child, along with what I said about those other 3 guys, for every issue that everybody had with the hitting, and I don't think in that case that was unfair.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Chris, what this team was built on and what they were built to be. You mentioned those arms that, if you in a healthy situation, would be maybe good enough to get you to a super regional and beyond, if all those guys are healthy. If you got a healthy Djukanich, if you got a healthy, you know, Holton, and all those situations. But the problem is, in today's world, and especially Vanderbilt, when the head coach feels the way he does and molds a team the way he does and wants to structure it in a way that that is kind of the antithesis of what he believes in. I haven't read the article about Maggie Corbin in The Athletic, but there were some interesting comments from her about their philosophy that were admitted. I don't know if you've read it or not. It's pretty interesting. Doesn't surprise me one bit. It's about the portal and paying players and the NIL and all those things. But when you're trying to build a roster, I mean, let's face it, they went after Skeens. They didn't get him. He was on campus, I think, for a visit. I think you and I talked about that. You know, if they get a Skeens, if they get 1 or 2 guys, you know, they get Shrek, who ends up being almost, you know, for average, he hit 306, Maldonado just above him. But if you get a Skeens and you swing and miss, and you don't get that, you know, that power pitcher number to add to your stable, you just don't know in today's. I mean, it's the free agency that's been created and who you go after. And then, you know, I'm sure they've got in their minds a board or on a piece of paper of some guys, some needs that they might have. And when you don't get them all and you're trying to replace, which is against really your philosophy, so you really don't want to do it anyway. But, you know, how much it changes. And so what you're left is when the dust settles of who comes back from transferring, and you look at what Danye Evans did yesterday for Charlotte in their elimination game, and, you know, that guy went on. I don't know what kind of year he had, but he looked pretty impressive. He had a great breaking ball in that game. So I guess my point is, it's so hard. There's levels of building a roster, and you don't really know till they all get there in August, till after the draft, after the portal settles. You get guys in the portal, and then you got to see, you know, what this composition of this team is. I've said before, and ad nauseum, and maybe to the annoyment of some people who listen to this team was, roster-wise, and as far as who played, a shorter roster than I've seen in years. And I've said that before, as far as reserve players who got quality at bats. Other than the regulars, now it looks like there were 6 guys who got at bats. One of them got, you know, played in 5 games and 2 at bats. I'm not even going to count him. So he's really 5. And what's that going to cause in the future? What is it going to look like when everything settles and you got people moving on or people coming in? Is that going to be a situation that's going to hurt this team development wise, as far as who they bring in, who's coming back and the experience of what you have next year. I mean, you're going to have a Davis Diaz. He's got 2 years under his belt. You're going to have a situation where you're going to have R.J. Austin, who is at second base, but is he really a second baseman? So we'll probably have another one of these to get it as far as the 2023-24 team. But there's some question marks. But one thing, again, I think if there's another bullet point, I said I had 3 earlier, the definition of this team, I'm going to add a 4th, and that would be how this team had a very short leash on the offensive side and position players are playing compared to years past when they maybe used 9, 10, 11 guys in reserve and got some at-bats, some experience. And this year's team just didn't do that.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. A couple things here. I think they were a little more aggressive in the portal, and I've got to be careful and omit a few things here in this statement. Anyway, I think they were a little more aggressive in the portal last year. No, they're not going to target 20 guys, but they will find some guys that they like, that they think fit. Then maybe was reflective of what landed on their roster. I'll say right now, I think that if it's not the NIL era, I think they probably have Paul Skeens on their team.
Probably,
and
sure.
And this is a very different conversation. We're not having an elimination conversation this morning. If that's the case. So there's that. And I think maybe the takeaway from that, and again, maybe we just do a whole other podcast. I think that's probably a good idea looking forward to next year, because we still got a lot to wrap up on this one. But I think if you want to look for some encouragement, there's this perception that he's just completely anti-portal. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think he has to know they're going to have to add a key player or two, and I expect they will. I mean, Vanderbilt is still an attractive destination. I know this is not 2019 Vanderbilt again, but it's not, it's also not Missouri, so there's that. Number 2, and I've completely forgotten where we were going. What was the other topic that you had just spoken about? Because you had something else there that I was going to respond to.
We're just kind of all over the place. I apologize.
Well, there's a lot to unpack.
Sorry.
Oh, I know what it was.
Yeah.
The Athletic article. Okay, I think if you're making a list of things to be concerned about, that would be 1A, 1B, 1C. What I read of Maggie Corbin's comments in The Athletic, and I haven't read the article. I just saw what was out on Twitter. I've got an Athletic sub. I just haven't had time to go and read that yet. But just the screenshots out there were very consistent with what I've been hearing privately for about a year. No, look, I don't think Tim Corbin is just going to go leave Vanderbilt at a time they just threw out all those stadium plans a week ago. That doesn't make any sense. He didn't look to me like a guy that was, going to be filing a resignation letter this offseason. But, and I don't think he's also going to leave before they've got that thing built. And I was being out of town. When are they going to complete the baseball stuff?
Don't know. That's a big question. That was asked to me a couple times this weekend by some people in the wanting to know, and I didn't have the answer. You wonder
maybe you want that completed for 2025 now and not 2024. In light of what he said, I don't know. I just don't think he's going to. I think that was a big negotiation point for him, I think he used Clemson to get a lot of that. I've been saying that for a long time. Asked somebody who's pretty close to it, or has been close to it, at least this weekend. I said, is my read on that right? And the answer I got indicated that it was. So I don't think he's going to just have all this stuff built, negotiate for it, and walk away. Now, Tim gets frustrated, and you could see that last night. Like when he pounded the table, I was like, that's a new one. I've seen Tim get frustrated with a lot of things. I've never seen him beat an object in the middle of an interview. So I think you've probably got, another 3 years minimum realistically. Who knows? But that has been the thing that's been lingering in the background now for a year or two, and his wife just went out and verbalized it publicly.
Yeah, and I thought that when the Vandy United campaign came out and all the drawings in the football building and the basketball, practice facility and the tennis courts being moved and the indoor, and there was one ingredient always missing, and it was baseball. Now, to an outsider, you might say, and someone who's maybe not paying attention closely, you might say to yourself, well, baseball's got the new facility down the left field line, and they just got new turf, and they've got, they've done some amenities, and they're probably okay. But what you don't realize in today's world, when you've got people coming out and chasing your coach, and when you talk about in years past, the ones we know about, that Auburn tried to take your coach. LSU tried to take your coach. Oregon, very much of a Trojan horse approach when they invited Tim out there to be a consultant to start their baseball program years ago with, from what I'm told, the full intention of just using him to get him to be the coach. It was one of those, like, we really want you to, we really respect you as a coach, all that you've done in the game. Can you help us? Can you come out here to Oregon and help us, get a committee going and tell us what we really need, with the full intention probably of having Tim Corbin be their coach. He turned them down. You had Clemson wanting your coach. So he's been through the gamut, and what else is there for him? Really, when it comes down to it, he's been here. I told somebody at the game yesterday, if Tim Corbin left tomorrow to be a commissioner of a conference, or if he left even to be the head coach, and I'm not saying this, I'm just going to throw this out there. Not that he would. I'm just making an example. If he went to be the head coach at Alabama, if Alabama, some booster said they were going to do that, or any other school, everyone would be shocked, but there's still going to be a statue of Tim Corbin outside the stadium one day, no matter how much everybody be upset about it. I mean, he's made his mark. That's his program. He will always be associated with Vanderbilt baseball. But my point is about when the Vandy United came, and when you have a program that's your bell cow, and it's not the one that makes you the most money, but it's the one that's recognizable all the time, which is baseball right now. Then anywhere you go, if you got a Vandy Boys T-shirt and you're at the airport, people know what that is, and that's the thing that stands out the most when you see that. It's become a brand, and that brand, you got to take care of your brand, and you got to take care of the bell cow, even though it's not going to be the one that's going to make you the most money. And that was one thing that when I saw it, I was like, well, is what's in there for baseball? And then next thing you know, some guy comes chasing after your coach, and then you backtrack. And I think Tim probably cemented that relationship by making, we need to get going here and make our program facilities and get some amenities. And so it was a good move on his part. And so that's when you saw the expansion happen. And next thing you know, you always heard in the back, we're drawing something up for baseball. Well, that happened, and the facility improvements are definitely, it will be unique. It'll be nothing will be like it in America. I don't think it'll be compact, different seating, different angles, and very much, I compared it very much what the football stadium is going to sort of be like in the end zone areas. A lot of lounge areas, a lot of open sight lines, open air, unique in the sense that they're different. If it has to be like that, if you can't move the baseball field over near the parking lots, the medical center parking lots, which a lot of people for years have wanted to do, if you're stuck with it being where it's going to be, I think what they've drawn up is very nice and is the best you could hope for. And same with football. I think they've taken that concept of, we're going to be us and we're not going to be like a cookie cutter and be like everybody else. And so, getting to my point, I just think that I don't think that that's the case. You got to worry about him going anywhere, but I'm glad he got taken care of. He's going to get that in his mind to keep up with everybody else, and just try to survive and hope there's some legislation to quiet down this open free agency that's going on, because it is different. And I want to read the article about Maggie, but there's just some different times we're in today.
And you left out Mississippi State as a program that chased.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's been a bit.
Forgot about that.
And I'm sure there have been LSU chased him
Texas,
twice.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean it's and there's probably some that we never knew about. I'm sure there had to be, but yeah, I mean I don't think if he leaves Vanderbilt, he's not going to be to take another job. I don't think it's going to be. I guess if you want to take any consolation, it's that just the game is going to chase him out if it happens.
Sure. Yeah,
and I don't blame him. And here's another thing. I may leave some for a podcast with Luke, but here's the thing. People have, and I've seen this on our board. Well, they've got to get with it, and they've got to recruit this with hitters, and their approach with athletes. All this stuff doesn't work, and blah blah blah. People are kind of making assumptions that the game is going to stay the way it is forever, and that just doesn't happen. I mean, you go back to, what was it, 2010 and the hot bat era. People now say it's the baseballs. It's something, and you can easily change the variables. Well, 2014, you couldn't hit a ball out for anything. I mean, Aaron Judge would have problems hitting the ball out. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not too much. And so everybody is sort of assuming that the conditions under which baseball exists right now are going to perpetuate forever. If there's been one given with baseball, and especially college baseball, it's that stuff changes. I mean, we may be here 2 years from now talking about, a team leading the country with 60 home runs or something like that. They could, the NCAA and Major League Baseball is this way too. It seems like there's always an overcorrection. And 2014 or whatever year they changed the balls, that was an overcorrection. But people are operating on the assumption that it's going to be power hitters and launch angles forever. Oh, who knows? They may change the balls next year, and it got a lot of publicity from some of those D1 guys in the SEC tournament. If the NCAA is anything, it's reactionary. Those guys have the biggest platform in the sport. So I wouldn't just assume that the conditions that persist, that don't really favor them right now, are going to go on forever.
No, and in today's era of power pitching where you're not even if you're trying to get recruited, Chris, in today's world as a pitcher and you don't throw 90, then you can just, it's over. It seems like, I glance up at the scoreboard at the radar gun of the other pitchers and the other teams, and consistently you got guys throwing in the low 90s. It's just an average, it's just a normal thing now. And so
if you don't throw low 90s, what's wrong with you?
Absolutely. And so you're seeing more and more of that, how the game's becoming a power pitching thing. And as it's become a power pitching thing, it's become a Tommy John thing, and guys having elbow issues. And we've talked about that too. So the game has really become a, that ball off the one that got R.J. Austin yesterday at second base on that double play. It's a ball he should have had, but I think the exit speed was 108, 110. It was not a tapper to second base. It was absolutely smoked. So, it's I think this, Corbin's done a good job of adapting in the past. But sometimes you wonder if you can just, if I still think there's power pitchers that want to pitch for this staff and for Brownie and for this team and for this program. It's just, look at what if you look and analyze it in the portal, what these guys did for these other teams and the impact that they had. UT gets a couple hits yesterday from guys who who they picked up. They got the shortstop from Kansas. UT added Dolander and Denton, from the guy from Alabama. He hit the game-winning homer against Clemson. Yeah. I mean, the starter from Charlotte that they got, the shortstop from Kansas. LSU added, Skeens and White, and it's just getting back to the article just briefly though. It is Vanderbilt's doing it differently now than everybody else, and they're just kind of sitting there. And you look at what Arkansas does, and Van Horn's got 12, 13 junior college players. There's not a junior college player on the Vanderbilt roster. No. Not one. And so it's just the people are building it differently, and it remains to be seen how they're going to adapt if they're going to.
All right, here's something that I have not heard discussed, I don't think at all, on my board or seen it anywhere. Maybe it's been mentioned, but I'm going to give you a number. You tell me if you can guess the significance. It's the number 4, and it's not Tim Corbin's jersey number.
You got me. It could be a bunch of different stuff. What is it? The number 4?
That is the number of runs by which they've lost their last 4 NCAA tournament games. All 4 games have been 1-run games.
Yeah.
So, it's not been like a break here or there, and this is probably a little bit different conversation, but that's how it goes. But that also goes to margin of error. There are alternatives to losing a game by 1 run, and one of them is, beating teams by 5. So, in a 1-run loss, you still got to score 2 more runs to win. So, really, you have to leverage that into more. But the point being, it's not like they're getting run off the field in these last 2 regionals either. Now, granted, this year, I thought it set up really well for them. I thought they got about as good a draw as they could have asked for. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, people want to talk about all they want. They had 3 conference tournament champions in there, and but I agree with you. I don't think the problem was the draw they got for this particular region. I just think that for one reason or for whatever reason, as he mentioned in the press conference last night, for whatever reason, I think his quote was, we couldn't hit the ball tonight, and those are. I don't know if they were tight. I don't know if they were pressing. I don't know if they just emotionally spent. But that's a telling stat there. You're right. The pitching was there. The pitching was good enough this weekend. It definitely wasn't the issue. It was on the bad side.
All right. Are you ready for the mailbag?
Sure. Let's hear it.
The mailbag is presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. First one from Papa Hick 4VU is the plethora of injured pitchers over the past 2 seasons calls for reevaluating their training or regimen.
Well, I know that Brownie and his crew that they work with in the pitching lab over there. I mean, they have as formulated a plan for arm care that's second to none. I don't think just ask Ole Miss what their situation is. Ask all these teams that are having the Tommy John injuries across the country. It's
LSU.
Yeah, it's multiple.
I think everybody's in that boat, other than maybe Tennessee. Tennessee's like the only SEC pitching staff I can think of, and maybe Florida. Although Florida may have had a guy out. It seems like everybody's got 2, 3, 4 arms out in the league, other than maybe a couple of teams. Tennessee somehow, I don't think Tennessee had a pitching injury all year, but that puts the Vols in the extreme minority.
Well, Dukanich wasn't an arm issue. It was a hamstring,
right.
So you can throw him out. And then whatever Holton issue, the forearm, elbow, that type of deal. And it'll be interesting to see what they plan on doing with him this summer, if he's going to play or not, or just shelve him coming up for his junior year. And you really didn't know sort of what the Hunter Owen situation is in detail. So you're not real positive about him. So it I think it was about par for the course. I think what it gets to is, in my opinion, I'm talking to people who perform these surgeries, the human elbow and the forearm are not inclined at an early age that these kids are doing it. Let me emphasize the statement at the early age, underlined, that these kids are throwing this hard on a consistent basis. The human elbow and the forearm cannot take the torque of throwing 93, 4, 5, 6 miles an hour at this age consistently, not have injury. I just don't think the elbow is meant to do that at that age until you're fully developed and strengthened. And so the more that continues, you're not going to keep a kid in high school from doing all he can to throw 90, because the bar is that you got to throw 90 to get recruited to a major college program, and it's celebrated. And so what do you want me to do? You want me to throw 90, 92 so I can get recruited, and then I do it, and I don't, for whatever reason, I'm not developed enough, and so I hurt my arm and I have to have Tommy John, and I'm out and I can't pitch. I think you'll see Kumar Rocker, if he mentally stays with it and does it, he'll have his surgery, and it's going to be a long haul back, but he might be throwing 97, 98 here in 16 months when he comes back, and maybe have a very good major league career. But that surgery is just seen such as the cop out. It's almost like a maintenance thing that, I'm just going to have Tommy John and get it over with. And I mean, Walker Buehler's now had it twice.
Yep.
Is that true?
Yep.
I think he had it after he got it. Yeah. So, and it's become such a commonplace surgery and a rehabilitative process coming out of it that these kids are coming back even stronger. So, long answer, but I really don't think it have identified without being inside that locker room what they're doing. But I can tell you they're versed enough, and as far as their arm care program and doing long toss and doing heavy balls and taking days off and running and all the things you need to do. Everything I've been told is not that it's being debilitating towards any of their arms and their arm care.
Well, it has felt to me like they suffered fewer pitching injuries than most until the last
Probably
2 or 3 years.
Right.
And so maybe this is just a small sample. I mean, look, Doolin, goodness, they've not pitched him in 3 years. They've tried to get that right. I'm guessing that's never going to happen. I mean, I'm sure he's got another year next year if he wants it. At that point, do you come back? I don't have any information there, and I'm not pretending to. Leboke, they could have pitched him at the end of last year, 12 months after surgery or 14 or whatever. They chose not to. They handled him with care. The one thing that I do second guess a little bit is that I had heard from the beginning they were going to keep Holton out 2 starts. I guess he talked his way back into pitching for that South Carolina series. That was a disaster in that appearance, and he did have one good game in Knoxville, but that was the last good game he threw all year. That's one that I wonder, maybe it doesn't make a difference, but maybe if they had to go back and do that over, and he doesn't throw against South Carolina, who knows, maybe he's pitching this weekend and it's different, but I don't feel like that they have, at least I don't see the evidence that they have abused arms or anything like that. Now, the one that you could argue is Rocker. They threw him a lot of pitches across his career, and they really were doing the same with Leiter. They did give him a rest. I mean, that's been kind of a criticism over them in the years that they would endure guys for long pitch counts, but really it had never materialized into injuries until just the last couple of years, Chip.
Yeah, I agree with you. Question of whether Rocker, Leiter in South Carolina, some criticism. Chip game state, there was, I'm sure, a bit all, and nobody thinks it's they're going to John, or they want to, a lot of kids advance in their discouraging them not to have that attitude. I think that's going on a lot more these days than we know. I'm not sure it's going on from I would predict probably within the Vanderbilt pitching staff, there's a few guys that don't have any personal knowledge. I have some hints from some people that it's going on, being a little more careful than about protecting these guys, being maybe overprotective. But when you're seeing it and you're looking around and you're seeing it happen so much, it does cause some alarm if that's going to be something that's going to be your livelihood for years to come. At least you're hoping to.
Apologies to the audience. Your audio was a little choppy there for a few seconds. That's probably my fault. I'm trying to stream Florida Texas Tech while I'm doing this, which is probably pushing it a bit. So I've turned that off now. So if anything big happens, I'm just going to miss it there. But all right, next question would be, and you're going to love this one. Door fan, what are the odds that a change is made among the assistants in the offseason, especially considering our inconsistent offensive approach and performance week to week and the season results, losing in Oregon State Regional, losing in our own regional in 3 games with only 4 hits and 1 run against a Xavier pitcher with the 4.48 ERA and a 125 whip? To put a finer point on it, what has Mike Baxter done to deserve to keep his job? How long does he get to rest on 2019? Which was a team he was only around for 1 year. I will put that with this one, and we'll hit them both at once. Go Doors 94. A lot of posters on this board are angry with the hitting coach. Is there any evidence to support this position, and what is your view?
Well, it's very difficult when we have a successful program with all the history that Tim Corbin has, and you hire someone who is a former player in the program, then the criticism becomes a little more, when it does happen, it makes it uncomfortable for everybody in the room. And that's no different in this situation. I mean, let's just call it what it is. You've got one of your own and a guy you coached. Now, I'm not saying that other places that one person's bigger than the program, and if you got to make a switch, you got to. And if I had any inside information about that, I don't. It just makes it difficult with a person who's very loyal. When you look at the David Macias and those guys, just maybe shy away from making hires of guys that they've coached, because if you do have to have part ways, it ruins the relationship, or could ruin the relationship. Those guys are really, really tight. I know that for a fact. I think the circles are really, really close over there amongst that coaching staff, and not a lot of coaching staffs are like that. I think some pretend they are, but it clouds it with. I think the relationship part clouds it. Will I think there'll be some discussions? I think they have discussions all the time. You got to wonder if one day, too, and I'm just thinking outside the circle, does Brownie take a job somewhere to be a head coach, or is he just content being where he is? But I'm not answering the question that was asked, and I apologize for that. I'm just going to give a big fat I don't know as far as whether it will happen. Surely the numbers are down. I mentioned the Enrique Bradfield batting .320 as a freshman, and he ended up this season looking at it. What was he, 279? So that's a drop from freshman year to junior year. But I think he's a loyalist. I think Tim Corbin's a loyalist to his staff and has been. You have a wildly successful coach who I think in coaching circles with Travis Jewett, who's now at Southern Cal, who lost his job at Tulane and ended up being now the hitting instructor. I think this team, if I'm not mistaken, did Baxter take over from Jewett? Chris, are you aware of that?
No, they had the in-between guy with the Yankees.
Right, that
for
didn't
a year
work out
or
too
two,
well.
And he cut bait on him after, was it 1 year or 2?
1 year. It was 1 year.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any weight on that, Chris. It's tough when you're talking about somebody's livelihood, and people can hate me for this and say you ought to get somebody else on the podcast. I'm a former player. I don't like talking about the livelihoods of former players. I consider myself, I'm close to those people over there. So maybe somebody like Luke could give their 2 cents. I realize I will say this. They need to change their philosophy in some categories with some guys and some approaches that I thought that they'd gotten rectified in that, especially the first part of the year, and maybe bad pitching got a hold of it when you're playing Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Georgia, Missouri. But I felt like that it kind of went back to the way it was in some parts of the season we talked about in years past. So I'll let you maybe take a stab on it, but it's a tough call, and we're talking about 24 hours after the season. I think some people don't want to take any more time and say, they need to make a change now. But I think this dust needs to settle a little bit and take a look at it.
Yeah, and that's a hard one for me to answer too. I don't really have any info on that one way or the other. Not that I've been really looking or digging. I've had plenty on my plate other than that. And I will admit, I'm biased here. I've known Mike since he played here. What's it been, 18 years ago now? I've always really liked Mike and respected Mike. The next crossword I have with Mike will be the first. I think a lot of him making a change there, and I would get why people want it, and even maybe why he would if he did it. But it is the complete antithesis of how he's built his whole program, if he does.
Yeah, and people wonder out loud. They say, well, I've seen even some questions on your board when I'm kind of strolling around and asking, what does a hitting coach actually do? What goes into being a hitting coach? Well, from a mental game,
can't go ahead. Sorry.
No, but there's different. I mean, there's mentally where your approach of how you're getting guys from thinking and guessing, and you can go through that in a classroom setting of, when your approach of this guy is throwing these pitches, then and breaking down opposing pitching. But my son, for example, my youngest son is taking some hitting instructions from a guy who's from California, and he's in his mid-20s. And we go out to his cage, and we have yet to hit live pitching. And my son's been playing a couple years, and he's a decent little player. But every bit of the instruction, when we go in there's about 15 minutes of fielding. The rest of the 45 minutes is on a tee, and he's using various stances and different drills, and he's got a PVC pipe that he uses, a big long PVC pipe that he sticks on kind of the top of my kid's head so he won't move his head in a certain direction, and you need to bend your leg at this angle, and you need to, and it is almost, it's gotten to the point of it's a golf instruction. I mean, there's some technical things, and don't think that doesn't go on with video and analyzing that ad nauseum, and being in a cage and using off a tee. These guys, 23, 22 years old, they're hitting off tees. So it's very intricate, and it's very those guys know what they're doing. But sometimes translating and hearing in a different voice for some programs is more beneficial. But what I think more from, I see some guys, again, what I said yesterday, guys pulling off the ball, trying to hit the big run, home run, not trying to get on. I thought against the Oregon, I didn't know why it's in certain bunches. This is the mentality thing. Oregon game, late in the game, why we weren't sometimes taken. I don't think we were taken to get a strike, or sometimes in some instances taking, you get 2 strikes. You got to get on base in that situation. You get base runners. Those little things, also the mental part of the hitting coaching of what goes under that. It's much more than just sitting over there and sitting behind the cage when a guy's hitting, going, yeah, you need to do this. Your hands are this, and just letting them hit. It's much more than that. It's way more intricate these days of what these instructors are doing.
Last one from the Admiral VU. Do you have any way too early predictions for the 2023-24 baseball season?
In years past, it would be easier to do because you weren't dealing with the portal. But you're not dealing with the portal as far as what your guys are going to do and what who you're going to bring in, who you're going to lose, and who you're going to bring in. So what positions those guys are going to play? Are they going to take in the situation? Who's going to play center field? And then I've mentioned three things that go into that, talking about the 2023-24 season. How many guys are you going to get into campus? The kid from Max, the kid from Indianapolis, he's not coming. I don't think. I mean, and so, it's all window dressing. I watched some video of that kid, and he seems like he's very flamboyant. He's got the double crosses on his cheeks with the eye black and the kind of longer blonde hair, and he's kind of flamboyant. He'd be a fun player to see roaming the outfield at Vanderbilt. He's not going to come to Vanderbilt. And he's been signed with us for how long? Probably committed for a year and a half. And he's the best prospect in the state of Indiana that they've had in years. And he's might
go 1 overall ahead of Skeens and Cruz, potentially.
Right. So, we can sit here, and that's a discussion if we have one of these in the fall or later in the summer once we see it. But it's too early to tell what this roster is going to look like. A guy like Calvin Hewitt, I kind of expected he would pinch hit a few times this weekend more than he did. Especially against the lefties that came in. But, does he sit there and go, what's it going to look like for me next year? I'm talking about portal-wise. I'm not trying to shove him in the portal, but you wonder if he's going to be the guy that's going to stick around, or in today's world that we're in, is he going to do that? He's going to move around and go to another place where he can start, or is he going to be like a Troy LaNeve and stay here for 4 years? So you just don't know. You don't know what the roster composition is, and I'd be 100% guessing until we know who's going to show up on campus and who the roster is going to be. I think arm-wise, we're going to be fine, but we got to have some guys in there. I think we have a deep need at catcher. I think Espinal's a really good catcher, but can he hit SEC breaking balls? And that's, I think, going to be his deal. So, do you do like everybody else and go get a catcher? Power hitting catcher, go get a power hitting first baseman, go get you somebody who can get balls in the outfield. Those seem to be the immediate needs, but number one, will they do it? Number two, can they get them? Can they get them in school? And number three, in 2023, can you pay them? Can you get them an NIL deal? And that's what the kids are looking for.
Feels to me like Hewitt stands to benefit to come back. I don't know why he wouldn't have an edge up on a starting outfield spot.
Yeah, I really like the way the kid plays and hits, and he's confident, and so I hope he does. I really like him as a player.
Yeah, I mean, that had he and Polk parked on the bench most of the weekend. I mean, you could, if they don't lose a key player or two of the portal, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape.
I think so.
If the pitching is healthy, because I think you could argue they could return a lineup of 6, 7, 8 guys who played a lot. And I know these guys aren't superstars, but you never know who takes the next jump. I think Fastein's got a lot of potential. Austin certainly got a lot of potential. I don't think it's as bleak as a lot of people left last night thinking it was, unless, again, it boils down to pitcher health and maybe you lose a starter or two to the portal. But if you keep your core guys intact, which for the most part they've done a decent job of doing, and I get the feeling that some of the guys they've lost the last few years and last year in particular, and it's plural, that they were fine with losing from a chemistry standpoint. It feels to me like they're going to be okay, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think Vastein's going to be a pretty good player. I think he already is a pretty good player. I mean, he hit 287. I think he can go get the ball. You saw his range a lot this year, and I think he can be a guy who can, if he hits 15, 20 points higher next year and be consistent like he is in the field, I think he ended up having a nice little year.
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit like 2018 did when that season ended. That they're going to be in the discussion for big things next year in preseason, but the big difference, of course, is NIL and the portal, and that's a whole different conversation. I feel like Same situation 2-3 years ago. This would be very easy to size up if you know the health of guys.
Sure, you just got to keep the pitchers that you have away from the operating table, and and that's going to be a key. Just it'll be interesting to see how Carter Holton, what they end up doing with him this summer. You wonder if they're going to pitch him somewhere in the Cape or wherever. They're just going to pitch him limited and shut him down, and maybe pitch him a certain number of innings, and but you might not know that until later on, because the word I was hearing was he maybe could have pitched in Omaha if they got there. It was doubtful, and even at that, and so I'm sure they have a plan, or they will have a plan for that going forward.
Yeah, I would just consider resting him the rest of the summer, honestly.
Yeah, I think he sat out all fall. He had a pretty busy season last year with the USA team. But, look at his numbers. He threw 50 innings, which wasn't tops on the team. Futrell had 83 that led the team, and he had 33 less innings than Futrell. And he had 14 less innings than Hunter Owen, who was second. So he was up there, but not the load that he had last year for sure.
Yeah. Parting thoughts, Chip.
Parting thoughts, it's taking heed of what Tim Corbin said last night. It's way too early, and it's probably I enjoy doing this, but to get my full view, probably way too early emotionally, less than 24 hours after they lose, to really give your thoughts on this. This team, up and down, inconsistent as far as their play. Sometimes it was brilliant. And gutty. I think the want to was there. I think there was a tremendous amount of grit for this team. Who knows? We might 30 days from now, when the dust settles, look at this and say this team maybe overachieved a little bit, won a Southeastern Conference tournament. Antagonists are going to say, well, the SEC tournament doesn't mean anything. But nonetheless, they won 5 games in 5 days. They played well at times, but were they the Vanderbilt team that lost to Xavier, lost to the directional Arkansas team in February that I forget the name of? Were they the team that got sort of manhandled by Florida, got manhandled and bullied in Knoxville by those two teams, and that little down stretch? Two really good teams that are still playing right now. So it's incomplete right now in your mind until things kind of settle. And that's what you got to do in sports. You got to sit there and say, well, he mentioned last night there was no raw, speech in the locker room, emotional thing, because it's too fresh. And those kids today, they probably, believe it or not, people often wonder, someone asked me that, do you think Vanderbilt players watch, get on Chris's board or listen to podcasts? I'm sure they do. Some of them might. There's enough of information out there available and different things, so they probably do. So they hear it, they know it, they know that they didn't play well this weekend, and the pressures that are associated with that are warranted. So I think we need to take a step back, and I know you'll be talking to Luke about some of the stuff, and it'll be good to get another perspective as what he thinks. He's been around Vanderbilt for a long, long time, and see that, and then get together maybe around the draft and after that settles, and see kind of what a roster would look like once the portal stuff sifts out. But just an up and down year emotionally for fans, and when your expectations are what this program has done for a long, long time, you're expected to be there playing, having things over with last night, and looking forward to a super regional. But unfortunately, that didn't happen this time, and they'll have to reconstruct and move forward.
Chip, I'm jumping into the closest thing I'll get to an off season. You are jumping into your busy season. Tell people about that a little bit.
Sure. Our firm, Frederick & Clark Realty, has been around for over 60 years here in the Nashville area. Residential real estate is our specialty. We've got over 180 agents that can help any buyers and sellers out there looking for a home to purchase or a home to sell. We are sort of the antithesis out there as far as those commercials you hear of getting quick offers and maximizing your profit. Well, in our theory, against that, we believe in marketing your home in a way that You have competition out there for people wanting to buy your home, and we have enough experience with relationships with fellow realtors in the mid-state area that we work with to maximize your profit by doing it a little different way than just flushing you out and getting your money quickly. We like to have the competition of marketing your home well, throwing it out there with a market analysis that makes sense for you all the way around as far as getting the right buyer in for your house. We can help with, on the buy side, with lenders and home inspectors, anything you want to complete your purchase. We've got those expertise of these 180 agents. So you can give me a call at 615-327-4800. We've been around again for 60 years. Vanderbilt folks, Vanderbilt graduates affiliated with the firm, Whit Clark, the Clark of Frederick and Clark, Vanderbilt graduate, close to the baseball program, family donated a baseball scholarship. My father and I, my late father and I, my brother, all Vanderbilt graduates. So if you are a Vanderbilt person and you're looking for someone to handle you with like needs and things that you care about, give us a call. Look us up on the web at frederickandclark.com. We'd love to help you out in a help of buying or selling a home here in the mid-state area.
Hey, Chip, thanks a bunch. Appreciate your time. And like I said, we'll do one or two of these again together in the off season as drafts happen and roster attrition happens and all that. And look forward to doing those. Thanks again for your contributions this year. These were great.
Sure, Chris. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrislee70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrislee70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.